Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different along with the normal upload. This is just going to be an additional thing. I'm going to probably just have it post whatever time it's done exporting and just go live because it's happening daily. But we're going to talk about the set. I'm going to talk about what I'm probably going to craft immediately, what I'm not going to craft, or we kind of get looking into it, things to be excited about or not to be excited about, where will it get play, will it not get play, things like that nature, and we'll just move on through there. I'm going to go pretty quickly as there'll be spoilers today, tomorrow, so on and so forth as the set is releasing and they're actually doing the set. First thing, we're going to stop off with our 6 mana legendary Gone, the Deepest Foundation. I really don't know how to say the beginning part, so I'm just not even going to try. It's a 6 mana 6/6, so it's pretty up there in cost. It's got Vigilance if one or more creature tokens would be created under your control. 3 times that many of those tokens are created instead. It's saying commander card for sure. If you're playing like the deny token strategy, it is a legendary creature, so it can be your commander. But in standard, I do so far see this to be a little bit out of the realm of possibility when we have things like mono red and soldiers kind of kicking about. That this is definitely going to be hard to play in standard. But whenever it dies, return it to the battlefield, tapped and transformed under your owner's control. Very important, showing that exiling effects are going to be much more relevant now, long as they have been. But Temple of Civilization was on the back. This does enter the battlefield tapped. If they remove it on their turn with like something, say, to populate, for example, blows it up, it'll enter tapped. It'll be untapped on your turn. However, it's just add a white. It is a land, by the way. That is very important as some of these other ones become legendary lands. That is something to take note of. So if you have on the front side and you play a different one and it also dies, it'll flip into a land. It's not legendary, so you get to play multiple, and then you kind of have the 1-2 punch where you get to play the card twice, have them both in play at the same time, but they're not affecting each other. It has 3 mana, transform Temple of Civilization, only if you've attacked with 3 or more creatures this turn, and only as a sorcery. So we can get back to this side and then produce tokens. A card that I could see being working well with this card because it's so expensive is something like a Wandering Emperor, and kind of using it as a win con in the late game, as tokens have been very soft, especially in best of 1, maybe best of 3 you can find a little more value, but Sunfall being such a prevalent card, I think this will be a hard card to sell me on, so I'm on 0 for 4. Now let's move on to Enigma Jewel. Enigma Jewel has a lot going for it, but a lot not going for it. Definitely going to be hard to see. We'll see if other cards in the set make it a little bit more valuable anyway. But it enters the battlefield tapped. It is legendary. They specified in the video that it's a main set piece, so of course it's legendary. But it enters tapped, so that's kind of one of the downsides, is you can't like make the mana and then play a second one for a blue mana and then make another mana, kind of like netting a mana. So that's out of the question, but we also have this bottom ability, which is a introduction to a new system, and it's called Craft, as we'll read it here. So this is Craft of 4. There's other numbers. There's Craft of 1, Craft of 2, things like that. So Craft of 4 or more non-lands with activated abilities. So it's 9 mana. Exile this artifact. Exile the 4 or more from among other permanents you control and or cards in your graveyard. Return this card transformed under its owner's control. Craft only as a sorcery. You have to, because this can tap for itself, technically. I don't think there's a lot of cases that you're playing this artifact and you're playing it, then activating it immediately using 10 mana. So really, this card's activation cost is about 7, because you'll use the 2 from it to activate itself. To flip it, to have each ability of the cards exiled with it or used to craft it. You may activate each of these abilities only once each turn. So if one of the abilities causes it to tap, you won't be able to use the other tap abilities. That's something to note. But so on and so forth. Whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. So if you have something in there that exiles something like, let's say, Soul Cauldron or something like that, you can tap, activate it. It's not a mana ability, but it is an activated ability. Copy it, you exile 2 things. This can make that combo a lot easier that's going around. I think the mana cost on its craft is going to be too much to handle, and we'll probably see this as a 0 out of 4 craft outside of some jank deck. That's what it is. Now we get to the Walker. The Walker, the set. I think they said a while ago that they were going to try to do 1 Walker a set, so this might be the only one we get. but it's a strong one in my opinion. It's definitely not a 4 of. I think we will be settling on 2 because it is kind of an expensive walker. It's in some of the colors that struggled to be more control based outside of the white aspect of it. For it to get to 5 mana, this is typically more of an aggro color combination. When you cast a spell from exile, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. You gain 2 life. That's very nice because it does not specify that it only happens once a turn, which is very important in these colors and the way his abilities personally work. Create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. Now the spirit that it makes is a little bit soft to removal because it does have 2 toughness, but it is its plus ability, so it has some protection, which is very important on walkers. And then we have Discover 4. Discover is a new mechanic of the set, but it is more of a rework on an old mechanic to kind of fix it / make it better. I personally think Cascade is wild. That is the ability that Discovered is derived from. So Discovered basically, so this is Discover 4, we'll use it as an example. Whenever you Discover 4, you exile the top cards of your library until you exile a card, a non-land card, with CMC 4 or less in this instance. Now, if it said Discover 3, you would go into hit 1 with 3 or less. So you can exile 5, 6, 7 mana. They won't stop you until you hit 4 or less in this particular case. So let's say, just for example, because it's on page, let's say we activate Discover, we hit Cilia. You now get to cast Cilia for free, and it just enters the battlefield. Nothing else happens. Doesn't give it like haste or anything like that. Say we hit a Cilia and we already have a Cilia in play. We don't necessarily want another Cilia to enter the battlefield because it's legendary. Well, the difference between Discover and Cascade is this one crucial thing. Cascade, if you refuse to cast it, it gets shuffled with the cards that you exiled with the ability on the bottom of your library. Discover puts that card into your hand, which is a very key distinction. So that allows you in these decks that are cascading / discovering to play things like counter spells, because now they don't feel as bad whenever you're trying to cast a spell and it hits a counter spell because you're obviously not wanting to counter your own spell. You actually get to put that card in your hand. So it's very important. The Discover 4 is worst case scenario. Draw a card. So -3. That's a lot of loyalty to give up. But the other side of it is Discover 4 could hit a Shieldred, and then you put a Shieldred into play for free. Now you go throughout your turn with 5+ more mana and do whatever you need to do. And now its bottom ability is where it gets really spicy. Obviously, Planeswalkers, you should never really judge off their ultimate unless they kind of come in and just do them immediately. We do get there a turn early, which is important. A lot of walkers come in, they require 3+ and then they ult. This requires 2 and then it can ult. But the problem is this card would no longer be in play, so it's a little bit sneaky because whenever you ult this or use -6, you want this card to remain in play or be able to play another one. So exile any number of target cards from your graveyard, add red for each card exiled this way. You may play those cards this turn. Very important. So let's say we have a play with fire and a lightning strike in there. We minus this because we're really close to killing our opponent. We just want to get the last little bit of lethal in. We -6. We exile those. We get 2 red because we exiled a play with fire and a lightning strike. So that's 2 cards. We get 2 red. It requires 3 mana. Not that big of a deal. Because they go in the exile and we get to play them, we actually get to trigger the top part of this Planeswalker's ability by casting a lightning strike. Now we trigger this. Now we're doing 5 damage and gaining 2 life. Then that play with fire also deals 4 damage, and then we gain 2 life because this top ability triggers more than one time. So on 2 cards alone in the graveyard with this and ulting, that's 9 damage plus 4 life for us. Not counting the other thing you have to take into consideration. There's Seal Fire, which is like a red and a white, deals 2 damage, gain 2 life. It has like kick for 6 or a passive 6 ability. Cast it again. That might be from the graveyard though, so maybe I'm wrong on that. But adventure cards work under this. So we just got a red white one that can deal like 3 damage, and then it's a 3/1. It says your instant sorceries have lifelink. That works well with this. You cast that from the adventure zone. Deals 2 damage, you gain 2 life. So there's a lot to go with it. It could be strong. I think I would be about 2 of. That's where I'd settle. Moving on, we have Cilia. I'm going to be quick about Cilia. I'm not crafting any. I think the card is not that great. but this is information that Cilia lost her spark. That sucks. I love Cilia. I think one of my favorite walkers. But one, legendary 2-drop. That's kind of hard to sell on. Second of all, its ability is completely revolving around other artifacts and creatures you control. So let's just read it here. 2 mana, tap it, create a token that's a copy of another target creature or artifact you control. Except as an artifact in addition to its other types, it gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step. So say turn 1 is blue-red, so we play a Swift Spear on 1. Play this on 2. It doesn't have haste. It's a 2/2, so it's very easily to remove. Second of all, it targets. So if you target a creature, you can remove it. The creature in response, Cilia does nothing. You spent 2 mana to do nothing. And if your argument would be, oh, on turn 3, I will play a creature and then I'll copy that one. Well, you need 5 mana. So I am personally 0 on Cilia. A little bit bummed about the card. I do not think it is that good. So that's where I settle on these 4. Let's move on to the other 4. All right, we are here with the next set of 4. We got the Micro Tyrant, we got Veto, we got Gishaft, which is a reprint. We'll probably just be skipping that a little bit, talking about kind of how it transforms meta slightly. And then we got Bone Horde, Dracosaur, which is a card so far I'm most excited about. But let's start left and go right like we did previously. We got the Fungi, the Fungi, the Fung Master. Trample. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control that are fungi or saplings. Fungi is plural for fungus. At the beginning of your end step, 3x11 black fungus creature tokens with this creature can't block, where X is the number of times you descended this turn, and thankfully it puts the descendant text box underneath. You descend each time a permanent card is put into your graveyard from anywhere. So, a little bit weird. We'll have to see how well that goes. I'm not entirely sure how to judge this card. We've seen cards like this in the past not do well, so kind of up in the air on what it is. But it is 3 mana. It is legendary, so that's also kind of questionable. We see cards like Glissa now, which is really strong, struggle because it is a legendary and it's so hard to get it down. Have drawing other copies and then kind of just holding them in our hand for a while, where we could be progressing our board state even more with other cards that are non-legendary. But moving on to Veto. Veto is a returning creature, not a reprint, but a creature that we've had in the past, or a personality in the Magic lore, I guess is the other way to put it. But it's very nice. The vampire text is important with another card in the set that we'll get to later that is absolutely mind-boggling to me. So, Vampire Demon, I don't think the demon text is necessarily that relevant unless they print something that makes it otherwise. However, it is a flying 4/4. It is 4 mana. It's a white, black, and 2. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, there is a creature that sacrifices for free in this set, so we don't even have to pay anymore. So, Sacrifice Tribal might come back in standard. Orzhov Sack or Rack Sack or Mardu Sack is what I meant to say. But we gain 2 life if it's the first time this ability has resolved this turn. We have another Omnath here. If it's the second time, each opponent loses 2 life. If it is the third time, create a 4/3 white-black vampire demon creature token with flying. One thing to note, you can't cycle through it infinitely, because if you sack another creature after the third time, that would be the 4th time a creature's been sacrificed, so it will stop there. So you can max activate it 3 times. So you can gain 2 life, make your opponent lose 2 life, and then make a 4/3. Kind of hard to set that up repeatedly on every single turn, but it is a flying 4/4. Surprised to see that itself doesn't have lifelink or like some kind of thing like that. Maybe not death touch, I guess, but having flying and it being a vampire and not just like having lifelink on attack. I know it does have a form of lifelink. You can see the art implies that something has to die to gain. So we'll move on. Now we have Gishaft, and Gishaft is a reprint from old Ixalan. Vigilance, Trample, Haste. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library. So if it deals 7, you're revealing 7. If it deals 5, you're revealing 5. Put any number of dinosaur creature cards from among them onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is a crazy ass reprint, I'm going to be honest with you. Because we already got pretty good dinosaurs. Like, it's Holly. Holly's really solid dinosaur that we already have. We have a green one that is our 3-drop Topiary Stomper that'll help us ramp to this. Those are just good meaty boys. If we have 8 mana, that means we're putting in 4/4 go get basic vigilance 4/4s. So it's definitely got a lot of value. The main thing I think this changes is how aggressive we'll see Domain transform into. Right now, Domain is a control deck. That is quite annoying to play against because of Leyline Binding, Sunfalls, etc., etc. But the problem for Domain is outside of like, here's my Atraxa, please don't kill it. Here's my Atalia, I guess I'll do things. If I hit bad, please don't kill it. Or things of that, where they're really soft to things like Sunfall. I think Gishath and some haste dinos will actually change the outcome of that deck, and it'll become a lot more aggressive. And in the in game, it's just going to start thumping you. You can't like sit back anymore. This also has Vigilant, dodges things like Wandering Emperor, has Trample, can't chump block it, and it has haste, so it is coming in quick. And then like Tyrannosaurus Rex can be played before it. Big creature, Toxic 4 on it, hit you for 7, play this after, hit you for more, do its ability, and then close out the game actually, instead of sitting there dirtling the entire time and hoping on our top decks. Last card is kind of a lot. I think we can see it a lot. I am excited about this card. I don't know if you can ever fit 4 in a deck, but I would like to. Main clause is it's not legendary, so that's a good sign. It is a dino, so Gishath can flip it out, so that is another positive. But it is flying first strike, and it's a 5/5 for 5 mana. We have 2 red and 3 colorless, so the restriction is not that hard. But at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Key distinction: this does not replace your draw step. A lot of times when this happens, your draw step gets replaced. This does not do that. So we're going to be looking at 3 cards a turn if this survives to our turn. You may play them this turn. Play is big key distinction. We exile a land. We can play them. Some effects only say cast. If you hit lands, you will not be able to play your lands because you have to cast a spell. You don't cast lands. We may play them this turn. If you exile a land card this way, create a 3/1, immediately get value. So even if we don't get to play that land, immediately get value. If you exiled a non-land card this way, create a treasure token. So it is getting us value without ever having to cast anything anyway. And then we also get 2 cards on top of that, along with it being a flying first striking 5/5. I would argue the card's good. How good in standard? Because again, you have to compete with mono red and soldiers and enchantments. Just tapping out, playing a 5/5 and praying whenever it gets ossified or leyline binding or something like that. Definitely a concern, but something to look out for, is I think that is probably one of the bigger cards of the set. And we'll move on to the next 4. All right, lowering down to some of the more unique cards, we're now getting into some of the rares. So we have a little less text, a little less to go off of. But we start off, I think, kind of weak. I don't think this card will see a lot of play. I think Commander will enjoy this card, but in terms of standard, I don't think this is anything that we want to put in our deck that has to compete with our opponent. Unless we're strictly mill, and then we have to get the 8 mana or cheat it into play with a reanimation spell, but also hope our opponent doesn't have anything good. So let's just read the card. For 8 mana, we got 2 black for 6. We have Bringer of the Last Gift, the Vampire Demon. Demon still I don't think is relevant, but we could find out in the future that it might be. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, so even if you cheat it in, it does not do its ability. Each player sacrifices all other creatures they control. Then each player returns all creature cards from their graveyard that weren't put there this way to the battlefield. So it kind of is a drawback to like Living In, where you exile all the creatures in your graveyard, you destroy all the creatures in play, and then, well, sacrifice them all because destroy wouldn't get indestructible. You know what I'm saying. Then the creatures from exile re-enter the battlefield. This is kind of doing the same thing. I just don't think it's that good. It's 8 mana, 6/6. It could technically bring back more creatures for your opponent than it can for you, as you're probably being the removal deck in a black deck. So, not a fan. But now we get to a reprint. This card has been insane and is what the Dino decks are going to love. This is a reprint, Growing Rights of Illamok. I think that's how you say it. I could be wrong. When it enters battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, transform it. On the surface, doesn't look that great. It's 3 mana. Look top 4. Maybe hit a creature. Not guaranteed, of course. But it's the backside that gets so absurd whenever you're playing a lot of small creatures that this card finds a lot of value. I just don't know in standard where we'll be sitting with this card. Once you flip it, you're perfectly fine. It's just on the other end of the spectrum, getting that 4 creatures and then flipping this and then it mattering is kind of hard in standard. But its backside is a legendary land. So this is what we brought up in the beginning, that this one's legendary. You do not want multiple in the flip because they'll blow up. Plus, if you need more of these than just one, I'm concerned on how your deck's built. Legendary land, it transforms. It can tap and add a green, so you don't lose any value there, but it can add a green for each creature you control. This is a Gaia's Cradle. This is a land that was printed way back in the day that is now in the reserve list. It is just a land enters, taps for a green for every single creature you control. You're playing tokens, doesn't matter. You're playing a lot of small dorky creatures, doesn't matter. This can help you get to your big creatures immediately and go on about your day. So other than the reprint, we're going to move on to Malcolm in the Middle. Thought I would plug it. But we got Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel here. We have a Siren Pirate. So it's not going to be a buff to anything fairy. It's not a merfolk, so kind of have to watch out for this. But Ixalan is very heavy on the pirate theme, so that might be relevant here. But we are 2 mana. Flash flying, so flash is very important. So we see a lot of its attack and toughness stats get little reduced there because of flash being so good. When it deals combat damage to a player, put a chorus counter on it. Draw a card, then discard a card. If there are 4 or more chorus counters on Malcolm, you may cast the discarded card without paying its mana cost. I don't think that will ever be relevant. We have a card that doubles it, that's unblockable. It's 2/1, that also can be played for 2. It doesn't see play anywhere. This does have flash. It is legendary, which is also tough. I don't think we'll see this get a lot of play. You might see it somebody playing like a mono blue deck is maybe a 2-of or something. Outside of that, I don't see it getting a lot of play. So let's move on to the last card of the 4 here. And the Ever-Flowing Well. This card is interesting. Hey, what? I'm recording, honey. What do you want? The Ever-Flowing Well. Whenever it enters the battlefield, mill 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. So it's very good for 3 mana. It's like not quicken, but it kind of fits that category. Where it does mill, and then we draw 2, and then we got Descend 8. We know what Descend does from earlier. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 8 or more permanents cards in your graveyard, transform it. This is normally where cards get their good value. It's a legend, mind you, legendary artifact land. Really nice, by the way. We don't have a whole lot of artifact lands, so some decks will enjoy this in Commander, but or artifact matter decks. When you cast a permanent spell using the mana produced by myriad pools, up to one other target permanent you control becomes a copy of that spell until end of turn. I think this is just a better version of a card that we read earlier. We can get it flipped pretty quickly. Other than that, I mean, it's kind of just a 3 mana, do what it does. It can flip into a land, then we can use it and get extra benefits out of it, so we can ensure we hit our land drops and things like that. So we're going to be moving on to the next 4 cards. We're getting into some of the softer cards, in my opinion, or cards that you probably just won't play, but you could. It's a little bit interesting to see. Soul of the Lost, 2 mana, 1 and a black. It's a spirit. Kind of has like that Tarmogoyf deal in the bottom where it doesn't have power and it has +1 toughness, so it doesn't die when you just play it. Additional cast a spell, discard a card, or sacrifice a permanent. Doesn't feel necessarily great, but let's read its ability. Its power, and so Souls of the Lost power is equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. So it does fit kind of like that Tarmogoyf style stat line, but it's just based off permanence, and it doesn't matter about the types. So it could be 2 mana, grow really big, but we'll have to see kind of how it goes. I think this adds on to the Sultai Miller Self deck where they're playing like Tyvar and the new blue-black adventure creature. So we could see this get in play, and that deck get a new piece to play along with it. Now we have Hit the Motherlode. Card will be incredibly weird, I think, in the meta. You could see some people playing it. It is a sorcery, so it's kind of hard, but if you play like a big Cascader deck in the meta, well, I guess we should use a new term, Discover deck, in the new format, it could be hard. The only real problem with this card is it does have Discover 10 and it does have a backup plan for if you miss, which eventually you will. If Discover card mana value lesser 10, so you could hit a 1 mana CMC card, and this could be a lot different. So it's Discover 10, create a number of tap treasure tokens equal to the difference. So you don't even get those treasure tokens immediately back. If you top deck this and you cast it, it's 4, 5, 6, 7 mana, 3 red and 4. In theory, you could hit a 1 or 2 mana spell. So let's say we hit 2, we make 8 tap treasures, and then we either cast 2 mana spell or put it in our hand and do nothing. So I'm not crazy about it. Do with it what you will. Now we'll move on to the ramp card. I don't know how much play this will get. The caves are really cool. They're common, so we'll get access to them pretty easily. But choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. It is search your library for a cave card. Put it onto the battlefield tap. Then shuffle. You can grab 3 caves, and they all have the discover mechanic. So they could be good in the late game. Put 3/1 counters on a cave you control. It becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste, still land. So this could be like 5 mana, make 1 creature a 9/9, or 3 different creatures, 3/3s, or some combination of such. Or destroy target enchantment. You can blow up 3, or you can do all these modes, make a 3/3, put a cave into play, and make it a 3/3 maybe. I'm not sure how that would work. I don't think it would work that way. But destroy target enchantment along with that, or search the library for a cave, destroy 2 enchantments. So there's a lot to go with it. And now we get to a mana dork. These are kind of hard to judge how relevant they'll be until we just get into the meta. The 2 toughness for 2 mana, kind of hard to sell on this card, but it can tap and add a mana of any color. We do have a lot of creatures that already do that in the 2 mana slot that have better survivability than this one. But it's really its ability that you're kind of playing it for. And that is 2 mana, exile target card from a graveyard. Most of the time, you're going to want to be targeting your graveyard with this card. You can also do that in response to like a graveyard trespasser, so your opponent's not gaining life, draining you. But you may cast a dinosaur creature spell from among those cards you own exiled with Intrepid. I'm not saying it. If you cast a spell this way, that creature enters the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Another new word, finality, is just a mechanic that we've been playing with, so don't freak out too much about it. It's a mechanic we've already been playing with. They've just finally put a keyword on it. But there's one important distinction about it. If a creature with finality counter on it would die exile instead, a card that comes to mind is Heartless Act or Glissa. Glissa and Heartless Act say you can remove up to 3 counters from a permanent. So say we have this, we play a dino, it has a finality counter on it. We hit our opponent with a Glissa, we remove 3 counters from a permanent. We can target our creature with finality counter on it and remove that counter off that creature. So if it dies, it would actually go back to our graveyard. Small little synergy play, but not sure if it'll matter too much. We'll just have to see on that card and move on from there. Alright, barring from getting this video too long, I'm going to start speed running and giving a little bit more of my thoughts, and then whenever we get to the commons and uncommons, I'll be skipping over a lot and just cover the ones that kind of like intrigue my interest. But now we have Jade Light, Spell Lurker, Spell Lurker, but it's pretty solid. It's like fine. It definitely has a mana dump ability into it. If you draw off the top, you can make it really big, or you can get a lot of the lands off the top of your library to ensure you hit a good card. But when it enters the battlefield, explore X times. Explore has been a mechanic we had in the past. I technically, over this card, I think there's a common that's just a little bit better, which is weird to say because the common shouldn't really be better than the rare, but I just don't know if you'll ever really find this ability too relevant. Could, because you don't get to draw the card. If you want to keep it on top, you're just going to put a lot of counters on this. It's still soft to removal, but things like that. And Explorer is a trigger that you can respond to. So we'll see on this one. I think it's fine. I think like the hard scale style decks will like it, but we'll just move on from here. Throne of the Grim Captain is first time reading this one for me. It is 2 mana. It's colorless. It's a legendary artifact. It has tap mill 2 cards. It does not enter the battlefield tapped, so we can do this immediately. So mill might become a thing for people. That will suck. Crafted a dinosaur. So crafting, from my understanding, can now change what it crafts with. So I didn't know that till just now. Crafted a dinosaur, a merfolk, a pirate, and a vampire. So that definitely seems tough to kind of get those. Although if you do have a changeling creature, which does exist in our format, that's all creature types, you can fulfill this requirement immediately. 4 mana, exile this artifact, exile 4 among the permanents you control. And or cards in your graveyard. Return this card transformed under your owner's control. Craft only as a sorcery. And backside's 7/7 apparently. We have the Grim Captain, like really cool art here. You got a little sword and everything going on. You got like 4 or 5 arms, different types. But we do get quite the card. We got Skeleton, Spirit, Pirate. We have Menace, Trample, Lifelink, and Hexproof. When the Grim Captain attacks, each opponent sacrifices a non-land permanent. Then you may put an exile creature card used to craft a Grim Pirate onto the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking. That's cool. That is a cool card. I definitely will probably play with this card, but in terms of it being good, this card's hard to judge in my opinion. But I definitely like it. Really cool. You get to make your opponent sacrifice permanents, and you may put an exile card tapped and attacking, so you can kind of discard a big chunker like a dinosaur, which is what we know about. So let's use a Tully as an example. We put it in the battlefield tapped and attacking. It has an ETB. We get to cascade and kind of hit some cards and do all that nonsense. Be really nice. We got Ancestral Echo here. 3 mana. It's a blue, white, and a colorless. It is a legendary spirit. Flying Ward 2. So it does have protection to some degree. We know how hard Rafine is to remove already with just Ward 1. This has Ward 2, but it's not near as big. But we have 3 mana, exile another target creature or artifact you control. Return to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next instep. My golly gee whiz. This can exile big dinos, make them relevant. It can exile a lot of things. It's a flicker card. Flicker decks generally have been bad in the past, but maybe a blue-white deck will figure it out and be able to play this kind of in a weird shell of some kind, or you can use it to help your creatures dodge removal and basically replay them for 3 mana. So it is what it is. And the last card we got here on this pile of 4, which I'm just going to start scrolling and going through cards as we go. Battlefield tapped is our green-white man land that we get along with the other ones that have been relevant. 4 mana, green-white, 2. Comes 3/3, which is cool. When it attacks, another creature you control gets a 1/1 until end of turn. Other creatures, so it can put it on all your things. We have token tribal decks. They become super relevant. This card's going to see a lot more play. So let's move down. We got some commons and stuff like that. Again, I'm going to kind of speed run these to some extent. Treasure Map is a reprint. It seemed a lot of play in the control decks back in the day and whenever it was played the first time. But we have 1 mana, scry 1, put a landmark counter on it. Then if there are 3 or more landmark counters on it, remove those counters, transform map, and create 3 treasure tokens. This is very nice to get to our big end plays. We're scrying, manipulating the top of our deck on our opponent's turn because it doesn't have to activate as a sorcery. Then it flips, we sacrifice treasure, draw a card, or we just add a colorless symbol worth of mana. And then we'll move on. We have a spring-loaded Saw Blades. It's like a typical white removal card. Enters battlefield, deals 5 damage to target tap creature and opponent controls. We might not see this get played too much. Creatures with vigilance kind of dodge this. It does have flash, and you can craft with an artifact. This could be graveyard or plays we know from the past, and then we'll flip it. Backside is pretty nice. Tap 2 untapped artifacts you control. It becomes an artifact creature until end of turn, so it can just attack. It doesn't have to be crewed. But then you can just crew it for 1 instead. But if you're an artifact tribal deck and you don't have a whole lot of creatures, that's still nice. We have Spyglass Siren. The reason I'm bringing this one up at all is because it makes a map token. Map token, on the podcast I do with Connor every week, I actually guessed this right on what a map token was. But basically, 1 mana, sacrifice it. Another target creature you control explores. Activate only as a sorcery. So it just does the explore mechanic, but makes any creature able to do it. I'll do with that what we can. Let's move on. We got a couple of cards here, including the card that I said was better than the other green 1-drop that we got that I think is really, really nice to be played. Start, of course, we got a reprint of Geological Appraiser, which is cool. This is a kind of a Bloodbraid elf reprint to an extent. It doesn't have haste like it does, but it does use our discover mechanic. So we kind of take haste away. Kind of because I do think discover's better, so I think that's why we don't see haste on this creature. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, discover 3, 3/2 for 4 mana. In a red aggro deck where you might see this get played, I'm unsure on it as of right now. But then we got the Scout. This is the card that I think is fine. It's 1 mana Explorer. So this is either a 1 mana 2/2 or a 1 mana draw card, which would be a land. So 1 mana, you surveil the top card. If you like it, you leave it on top. This is now 2/2. If you don't like it, you throw it away and then just draw, or draw a different card on your upkeep. Or you play this and it stays a 1/1, but you get to rip the land off the top and put it in your hand. So I think this card is pretty solid, especially for the early aggro decks. It's a Merfolk, so that'll have relevance in the set, as Ixalan does have a lot of Merfolk in it. Now we get to another Descend creature. This card is kind of an annoyance. I think you'll be seeing like maybe 1 in the deck, maybe 2 at most. I doubt it because it does have reoccursion. We got Vigilance, we got Menace, we got 5 mana for it. For 3, a blue and a black. Descend 8. That is a blue, black, and 4. Return it from the graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. We know what that does now. Activate only if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard and only sorcery. So it is just like a 5 mana 6/4 that you can bring back later, so you don't care to discard it to something like a Liliana or something along those lines. So we'll see if this card gets any play. Charted Course is good in your Prowess style decks, especially if we get the attack. It's just 2 mana draw 2. So we like Charted Course as well. Moving on, we will just get to the Bird, which is nice. This is a 1 mana flying vigilance creature. It's a 1/1. We have a couple things like that. It's just cool, so not a whole lot to say, but if it dies, target creature you control explores and kind of grow another creature so it doesn't go out for no reason. Now we get our first cave that I stumble across here. We have a couple more coming up, and then the video will pretty much be coming to a close. We got Cavernous Maw. It is tap out of colorless. It's 2 mana. Becomes a 3/3 creature until end of turn. It's still a cave land. Activate only if the number of other caves you control plus the number of cave cards in your graveyard is 3 or greater. You had to have 3 caves in total to activate. Wording's weird on it, so we'll move on from that. And we'll get down here. We got another Merfolk, but it makes a map token sack. Nothing too crazy on it. Nothing too crazy here. We got this card in its battlefield. Just haven't seen this one, so I was just going to skip over it, but we'll just read this as our last card before we get to our caves here. But I know the Deep King, when it enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target, craft with an artifact, has flash, so it can remove stuff, and we craft it with the artifact. Enters the battlefield, attached to target creature control, which is nice. It just gives it a 2/0 buff, and then we can equip it later. I don't think this card's necessarily that great, but it is what it is. Now we got these lands. They're all the same pretty much, just different color. So we'll just read one of them and call it a day. So I'll just get past the blue one here and just read one of these. Basically, they all enter tapped. We can get it with the land fetch card that we saw earlier in the past. We can get these with just like making extra land drops. There's a dino with adventure on it. Doesn't see much play, so we could use something like that and get around the tapped being super relevant anyway. But it is 5 mana for all these. It is 4 in whatever its respective color is. So let's just read the black one here. It is 4 in black, tap, sacrifice it, discover 4, activate only as a sorcery. So if you're just dead drawing, you draw a land, you don't really want to use that land, you could sack these and try to hit a card, which is really relevant, especially in some of these colors. The fact that like black could be hitting Shieldred, green black can be hitting Shieldred, Glissas, Graveyard Trespassers, Liliana the Veils, all these good things. White can be hitting Wandering Emperors, Depopulates, things of that nature. Red can be hitting some aggro creatures, although I don't think red will really see it unless we see a big red deck. And then blue, kind of the same scenario. Then we get down here, we just have some of the showcase arts. Card was already spoiled and things. So outside of that, these are the spoilers for the 24th. So I'll probably be doing this other times than that. I was using Goldfish as the reference here. But I hope you all enjoyed and kind of get an insight in my thought process on some of the cards. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to let me know. If you don't, this is a lot of work for nothing then, but that's fine. We'll be fine. So other than that, I'll catch you all later, and I hope you enjoyed the content. And again, a normal video will be uploaded at the normal time at 7 EST. See you all later.